Thank you very much, Ms. Brittany Lewis, for this kind introduction. And I want to thank everybody who made this possible. Dr. Gonzalez, of course, to Nuestra Familia, Nuestro Futuro, also, our Vice President of Academic Success, and of course to Student Life, Al Dorsey out there, Lilian Hule, Brittany Lewis. The Curious Minds Committee also, thank you for sponsoring this, Dr. Joan Barr back there, and everybody in the committee. And of course, all of you. Well, let's then define a piñata. So what is a piñata? Well, we have an example right here, and it's actually a very nice example. It is a device. You can call it a toy if you want to. It has a hollow core, and traditionally it's made of clay. It's a fragile pot of clay. But because in the US we want to make everything safe, right? So in many cases, this one, I don't know how it's built inside, but it's super, super light. So it's very likely, the core is very likely either cardboard or styrofoam. It's supposed to be filled with candy, fruit, and goods. There are places that just fill it with flour and then cash, coins and bills. And then, I mean, you hang it, you have to swing it. Kids will take turns blindfolded. They will be blindfolded, take turns at trying to hit it. So you have a stick they use to hit it. As you saw in the case of Curious George, he had to be blindfolded. So after you're blindfolded, they turn you around, they spin you around, and you live kind of dizzy. This, in some cases, can lead to disastrous results like that one. And it's a good idea to keep all the kids away from the piñata because they can get injured also in the process. And that's why we're not going to break it today. We are not going to break it, but we have a very, very nice example. We'll get back to this example. It is a device that is used, usually broken at the end of a party, a children's party. But now, not only a children's party, but almost any parties. Now any party, you can have a piñata. End of season, right before going on a break from work, an office party, somebody's birthday. They're very, very common on birthdays. And the traditional piñata, next slide, it looks like this. And it's, well, actually, like this. This is very traditional. And it has a round core and 7 points. And it is decorated with very, very, very bright colors. What do the parts mean? Well, the core itself represents, we're going to get back to this in a little while, Satan itself. I know, yes. So you're tearing up Satan. So it's actually a beating in effigy. And then the 7 points are the 7 cardinal sins. But we're going to get back to those because now we want to talk about the history of it, the history of this device. It is very, very common throughout not only Mexico, but now the whole world. This is a mural by Diego Rivera, La Piñata, and it's at the Children's Hospital in Mexico City. It is very, very popular in art. This one is by, this slide is by Arely Morales. And she's an American artist, painter. And it is, of course, one of a major symbol of pride of Mexican culture, but not only Mexican culture, but also Mexican-American and Latino culture. So now it has become mainstream, not only in the US, but actually much of the world. We have famous artists. This one is actually an artist from the Dallas area. His name is Alfonso Hernandez. And actually Jose Ralat, he spoke for us about the American taco not that long ago. He wrote an article for the Texas Monthly in which he calls this piñatas too beautiful to break, too nice to break. And that's the artist. That's his picture up there. Again, his name is Alfonso Hernandez from Dallas, Texas. And these are some of the examples of the work that he makes. Well, these are very traditional. A donkey, a burro, that's one of the most common. Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean. Goku from Dragon Ball Z. Grogu from The Mandalorian. This is an alebrije, which is a traditional Oaxacan type of craft. And then I'm going to quiz you on this, being I cannot leave the teacher behind me. Who is this? The one, the figure at the forefront. Somebody said it over here? Selena Quintanilla. That's Selena Quintanilla. And of course, something very, very common also to use as a piñata can be your favorite cartoon character, your favorite politician, and also the politician you dislike the most, which has been the best-selling piñata throughout Mexico and the US for the past, oh my God, it's like 10 years already. All right, and I'll leave that to anybody's imagination. And so yeah, some of them are very beautiful and almost too beautiful to make. Now, according to most popular websites, the piñata originates from China. So the story goes that Marco Polo, he traveled through the Silk Road in the 13th century, and he spent actually like 3 decades in China. Of those, actually 3 decades along the Silk Route. Of those, he spent about 17 in China. He made at least 2 visits to the Khan, to the Emperor of China. At the time, it was the Khan dynasty. It was Kublai Khan. And supposedly, what many of these popular websites says that he wrote a book called The Travels of Marco Polo, in which he documented that he witnessed the piñata and brought it back to Italy. And popular websites repeat after one another. They just repeat what is said in one after another. But we had, being good historians, we had historians that went after this story. And the one historian that went after this story, his name is Yang Chen. Yang Chen, he was born in China, got his PhD at Vanderbilt University, and currently works at the El Colegio de Mexico in Mexico City. And he's an expert in Confucianism. He has written 2 academic books, a bunch of articles. So he went after this, and he wrote an article trying to trace this story, and he calls it from the that you knew, and if anybody speaks Chinese or Mandarin, any of the languages of this part of the world, forgive me because I am not fluent in any of them. And he said, okay, so the tradition comes from China. Well, historian Yang Chen actually went to the source, which is the Travels of Marco Polo, up and down, read it 1,000 times in 10 different translations, and when try to find the original Italian, it's not there. So basically, somebody made that up. Marco Polo was in China. He brought the tradition back to Italy. Then from Italy, the Spanish took it to Mexico, and that's the origin. Well, no hard evidence. However, something that Yang Chen found, and then I found this in several popular websites, is that about 3,000 years ago, during the Zhou dynasty in China, gave birth to this tradition, which is called the hitting of the spring ox. And this tradition starts with some of the regional governors that built an ox out of clay. So you have the clay core. It's made of earth, made of clay, and it's filled with dirt and seeds. And this is a ceremony, a celebration that is performed at the beginning of the agricultural season, before the planting, before the rains began, the spring rains began, at the end of the winter, before the spring rains began. And it's a way of wishing, it has a spiritual meaning, of wishing a bountiful year and a bountiful harvest, so people won't starve to death, and the animals won't starve to death. And so, in a way, the ox represents the draft animal that is going to pull the plow. And this is something that still gets celebrated in different parts of China. This picture is actually from central China, and it's from I'll get that in a minute, it's from the province of Nanyang. And you have basically a clay core that is covered with papier-mâché and then decorated in bright colors. And then you bring that to the city officials or regional officials who bless this figure and then symbolically hit it, and then you bring it to the main square of the city and you have children thrash it. Children beat it up until they break it in small pieces, and then everybody takes home some of the dirt and some of the seeds. So this tradition is still there, and it's very similar to a piñata, right? However, there's no hard evidence that this is the actual tradition that gets brought to Italy. Because in Italy, there's a similar tradition. So what we have here is actually maybe a case of multiple origins in which different cultures create similar cultural practices, which does happen a lot. And what happens in Italy is actually something similar. And here's another story also that gets told a lot, but for which at least Professor Chen, young Chen, they could not find hard evidence. And that is that in ancient Rome, Roman soldiers like to hang clay pots and then hit them with their swords as a type of game. They filled them with goods and then they collected the goods. And this story, again, there's no hard evidence of that. But it makes actually for a good story saying, well, you know what? Over here in Italy, in ancient Rome, you also had this ancient tradition. Now, is there hard evidence for anything? Well, there's some hard evidence for some of those traditions. We'll get to those. The piñata, and if you see the spelling on the top left, this is the Italian spelling, because it's an Italian word, P-I-G-N-A-T-A. The piñata, there's hard evidence that this is a tradition that existed in late medieval and early modern Italy. And it is something that was celebrated during the carnival, before the Lent season, the Lent being the celebration of the 40 days that Jesus spends in the desert fasting before beginning his ministry. So it's tied to these religious celebrations throughout Italy, in which people actually hang clay pots that are filled with goods. But if you see, these are not decorated. These are not decorated. And so now for this, there's hard evidence. Variants of that are actually hitting the pot while it's on the floor. And the person that is hitting is also blind, is also wearing a blindfold, or in this case, a mask. You can see the blindfold, the stick, the hanging pot of clay, and that's actually what piñata means in Italian, a fragile pot of clay, or a fragile pot. Now, there is also another tradition in Italy. In some parts of Italy, around Naples, the tradition of actually hanging these and decorating them in the shape of a large white dove. So by now we can see the symbolism of the piñata is very, very, very Catholic. It's very religious. It's part of the Western Christian tradition. And this one, the ones that is decorated in the form of a large white dove. So according to this tradition, what does the large white dove represent? What do you think it represents? Peace. Yeah, that's a very good answer. Closer to Christian tradition, Catholic traditions, large white dove, baptism, descending, something. What is? Yes, I heard it back there. I heard it from several people. Yeah, the Holy Spirit. So you see all these symbols, all the symbols are here, and we are leading closer now to what happens in Mexico. Now in Mexico, we have another tradition. Or actually, some people argued that this was also part of a tradition, the tradition of and it's called Panquesalistli, and I'm actually mispronouncing it because there's another Z or a T somewhere. I'm going to get it right this time. It's called, Panquetzalistli. Panquetzalistli is the 15th month of the year, the 15th month of the year that celebrates the births of Huitzilopochtli. Now, this is historical. There's a whole book actually more than one book about the Panquetzalistli and the birth of Huitzilopochtli, which goes like this. Coatlicue, the mother of the gods, is pregnant. She's going to give birth to the most powerful of all the gods. And as she's getting ready, all his multiple brothers and sisters are waiting to kill him, right as he's born. And he's going to be born at the end of the 15th month, which is actually the winter equinox. So he's going to be born on the equivalent of December 24th. And they're waiting to kill him. And he's born. But he's born as an adult in full armor. And he mutilates all his brothers and sisters. Very bloody, right? Okay. That's the birth of Huitzilopochtli. He's the god of war and the god of the sun. And then there's a journalist, his name is Jose Burciaga. It's the author of the book Ring Cultura, Chicanismo. Jose Antonio Burciaga. Last name is Burciaga for sure. It's in the bibliography, but I want to flip through the slides and right now. The Aztecs celebrated the birth of Huitzilopochtli by decorating a clay of pot that they covered with colorful feathers, which then they filled with goods for children, like candy and fruit. And it's a very nice story, but like the story of the Roman soldiers and like the story of the Marco Polo bringing the piñata from China to Italy, it has no historical founding. So yes, there was this month, and there's a celebration, not of Huitzilopochtli, and it does last a month. However, that little part of the pot of clay that gets decorated in feathers of many colors and filled with candy and then broken with sticks, simply there's no solid evidence. And that's also another story that gets told in popular websites all over. There's no hard evidence. However, there is hard evidence that the Aztecs had something to do with the making of the piñata, which takes us to the next slide. This is an Augustinian missionary, a friar, in the town of Acolman, Acolman, right north of Mexico City. Actually, by today, it has been absorbed by Mexico City. It has been absorbed by Mexico City. And they built a large monastery from 1538 to 1580. And when they began evangelizing the Aztecs that the Spanish conquered, they always began with the children, because you can indoctrinate children in ways that it becomes very, very, very hard to do with adults. This happens in the US with the residential schools for Native Americans. We cannot force Christianity upon the adults, but we can indoctrinate the children. So they bring the children, they start with the children of the nobility. This is the Aztec nobility. And together they create a piñata, Mexican piñata. The Augustinian missionaries, they bring the pot of clay from Italy. They bring that. And then they take elements from Aztec culture, which means that the story about the clay pot covered with feathers of Huitzilopochtli might be, there's a chance that it could possibly be historically verified if somebody dug deep enough. It would take a lot of research, and I actually kind of hit some dead ends, and I didn't continue, because together they create this, and they come up with this. So it's a big difference from the empty, bare pot of clay of the Italians to this. And they decorate it, and every part has a meaning. It's about teaching Christianity to Native Americans, to children, because it's so hard to teach to adults. And then they say, well, that way, these kids will grow up and they will have kids, and then that way we will evangelize the Aztecs in ways that it's been very hard to do with adults. They create this toy, this piece, which every part of a piñata has a meaning. The core, like we said earlier, the core is a fragile pot of clay that in modern times has been replaced by styrofoam or cardboard that represents Satan. In other words, Satan is going to get smashed. Okay, represents Satan. The 7 points, and this one has 7 points, represent the 7 cardinal sins. And here I'm going to cheat because I'm going to actually read them. They are greed, gluttony, wrath. Help me out. That way I don't go to my notes. Okay, greed, wrath, gluttony, lust, envy, speak up, sloth, greed, pride. Okay, pride, thank you. We got all 7. Okay, we got all 7. They're on the last slide. Okay, I'm going to show it to you, and I know it's one of the answers. You can take a picture of the last slide when we get to it, but I don't want to disrupt the flow of things. So each of these represent the 7 deadly sins. And I'm going to actually switch to this one. Switch to another slide. Because then, so the points represent the 7 deadly sins. The colors, which have to be very bright, represent temptation. The temptation of falling into those. Lust, envy, wrath, sloth, etc. Greed, pride, etc. And so the Christian message is there, right? I mean, it's all there. The colors represent, bright colors, again, represent temptation. And the stick represents faith, faith in God. Okay, the core is Satan itself. That goodness is going to break to pieces. The 7 points are the 7 cardinal sins, and you have them there. Let's not repeat them again. Bright colors, temptation. The blindfold represents faith in God. So you have, what's his name? Curious George, seemingly was very faithful. The stick, the stick represents the virtue of the will, that will overcome sin, and also represents the strength and the grace of God. And this is why I asked, and I really appreciate it. I'm really grateful that we got a 7-point piñata that we could use to demonstrate. That is the symbolism. And then the goods inside, which traditionally are candy or fruit. And now they have changed because, several instances. There are times when you fill it up with flour and then coins and bills. So everybody jumps into the flour and they're all covered up in flour, their faces, and they're all covered up in flour, and they walk with some coins and some bills. That is the blessings that come from living a godly life. And all of these are what the Augustinian friars, together or along with the Aztec children, come up with. They come up with this starting in the 1530s. And it becomes a tradition, and of course, the original meaning, we don't say that it has been lost, because it's still practiced in the 12 days of Christmas, the 12 days leading up to Christmas, from December 13th to the 24th. That's still practiced, but in many cases, they have become more secular, in which it's just part of a party. A party, and you fill it up with whichever goods you want to. This is the monastery, what remains of the monastery of Galván, very beautiful. And inside they actually have a large workshop that still functions today, in which people make traditional piñatas that they are sold as a fundraiser, and also as a way of keeping the tradition, because something else that they teach them constantly is the history and the meaning of the 7 points, because for many devout Catholics, they feel that it's a tragedy that the meaning is being lost. That now people just use it as just for fun, and they don't remember what it means anymore. Now, so we have talked about the origins. We have talked about how there is this tradition that exists in China that is parallel but not identical, for which there's no cause and effect relationship with the Italian piñata. But as we saw in Curious George, that has become part of U.S. mainstream culture. And if it becomes part of mainstream culture in the U.S., then guess what? It's going to become part of mainstream culture in the whole world. So this type of piñata is actually going back to China, or going to China now. But it's very, very different. The next 2 slides are actually from a website called Vagabond Journey. And it's a traveler, blogger, who witnessed several birthday parties in China. in which people were actually breaking piñatas that they, according to them, they got from the Americans. So these piñatas, according to them, came from the Americans. Now, in a strange twist, the Mexican piñata is coming to Italy. This is the one from Italy. This is a website actually by a business, an enterprise that holds or hosts parties for a fee. Of course, you have to pay. But they do everything for you. You know, the hall, the venue, the tables are decorated. They provide the food, live music if you want to. They make parties for adults and for children. And for children, they are promoting what they call the South American piñata. It has become the South American piñata, which they also get mostly from U.S. sources. And you can see they took a lot of effort to take this picture. This is an official picture from the website because they captured the right moment, or maybe it was a Photoshop, I don't know, when they are breaking the piñata that is in the size of a sliced watermelon. Okay. So that means it has become full circle. You know, in a way, this is a tradition that has multiple origins, that now has become global and now it exists in much of the world. This brings the presentation to an end. The next two slides are, the main sources, the bibliography, and then the one that I showed with the meaning of the different parts. This brings that to an end, and it also opens the floor for questions and answers. Wow. See, there are benefits of doing what I didn't do today, which is to follow a script. Well, first, what is syncretism? Well, syncretism is basically the fusion of cultural elements from different origins. If you have cultural elements from different origins that create a new tradition or a new custom. This happens all the time when cultures meet each other. The US meets Mexico, the piñata changes tremendously. In this case, more specifically, it's the fusion of Italian traditions, the clay pot, the piñata that originates in Italy, in the late Middle Ages, early modern era, that then it comes to Spain, and then the Spanish bring it to Mexico, where they mix it with Aztec elements, and Aztec children contribute, and then the end result that you have is something that looks like this. So that would be an answer. Yes. Well, very good question. Actually, the traditional piñata is still used, like Catholic churches. They celebrate the 12 days of Christmas, Las Posadas, from December 13, and many of them break a traditional piñata at the end. And some of them, many of them are engaged in what they want to call a renaissance, or rescuing something that they feel is getting lost to this this wave of commercialism. So they are trying to, or they are rescuing that. I think, as long as I remember, and now this is more anecdotal, obviously, it's not so much scholarly, is that, okay, I'm dating myself, I was born in the 60s. As far as I can remember, I have seen both uses. As far as I can remember, I have seen piñatas that are fully secular, if you want to, profane, if you want to call it that way, in which is just for fun. The size of a donkey, or any size, the size of your most loved, most beloved, or maybe your most hated politician. I've seen those also for decades. And then at the same time, the ones that have a deep religious meaning, deep religious significance. Which is basically in the 12 days of Christmas, at the end of a posada, at the end of a celebration. There might be, but I didn't find any. It seems like it's up to the artist. I'm going to scroll to the top and show these two or three, several of them. Seems like it's up to the artist to decorate them with the colors they want. This one here is decorated with the colors of the Mexican flag. Green, white, and red. And no, just bright colors represent sin. But as far as the little that I read leading up to this did not show me where a specific color represents a specific temptation or a specific cardinal sin.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Galvan, for coming and giving a talk about piñata. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
We also hope that you enjoyed your deconstructed piñata over here.